The train whistled for the last time before disappearing into the horizon, leaving only a cloud of dust and the heavy silence of Millbrook, Oregon. It was 1890, and that forgotten little town in the middle of nowhere rarely received visitors. But that day, something different had stepped down from that dusty wagon. An elegant woman, dressed in a navy blue velvet coat and hat adorned with feathers, walked down Main Street with firm steps but lost eyes. Her name was Grace Whitmore, and at 40 years old, she was one of the most acclaimed actresses in the theaters of San Francisco and New York. But behind that haughty countenance and impeccable posture, there was a shattered soul. Grace carried an emptiness that not even all the applause in the world could fill. She had lost her only child as a baby years ago, and since then lived as a shadow of herself, playing roles on stage and in life, but never truly being herself. The residents of Millbrook stopped their activities to observe her. Women whispered behind curtains, men tipped their hats in reverence, children ran to see up close that almost mythical figure who had emerged from nowhere. Grace felt all those stares but continued walking, searching for something she herself didn't know what it was. That's when he appeared. From the midst of the curious crowd, a man stood out. Not for his height, nor for his elegance, but for something indefinable in his eyes. His name was Samuel Hayes. He was 45 years old, and his calloused hands told the story of a lifetime dedicated to hard work. He wore simple clothes, worn by time, but there was a dignity in his posture that drew attention. Samuel had lost his wife and 2 small children in a cholera epidemic 3 years before. The tragedy could have destroyed any man, but he chose a different path. Instead of surrendering to despair, he found purpose in helping others who suffered. He worked from sunrise to sunset on his small farm, but always found time to bring food to the needy, care for the town's orphans, or simply offer a word of comfort to those who needed it. When Samuel saw Grace walking down the street, something in his heart moved. It wasn't physical attraction, although she was a woman of impressive beauty. It was something deeper. He recognized in those green eyes the same pain he had carried for so long, the pain of someone who had lost everything and no longer knew how to live. Without hesitation, Samuel approached. Grace stopped, surprised. No one had dared to address her directly since she had arrived in town. He looked into her eyes for a moment that seemed eternal, then extended his right hand. In his palm, a silver coin gleamed under the late afternoon sun. Samuel offered the coin with a calm and steady voice, explaining that it wasn't charity but a reminder. Grace looked at the coin, confused, questioning what kind of reminder that would be. The man smiled, a smile that carried all the wisdom of someone who had faced life's storms and emerged stronger. He explained that every coin has 2 sides, and sometimes when we think our story is over, we discover we were just looking at the wrong side. Grace took the coin, and the moment her fingers touched the cold metal, a wave of memories invaded her. She remembered when she was a child, poor, living on the streets of Chicago with her sick mother. She remembered the day when a stranger gave her a coin just like that one, saying she would be special someday. She remembered how that simple gesture had changed her perspective and motivated her to fight for a better life. But she also remembered how upon achieving success, she had completely forgotten that moment. She had forgotten about gratuitous kindness, about the simplicity of gestures that truly matter. She had become an empty person, obsessed with fame and recognition, but incapable of finding true happiness. Grace asked who that man was, with her voice choked with emotion. Samuel replied that he was just someone who learned that life isn't about what we lose, but about what we can still give. Then he slowly walked away, leaving Grace standing in the middle of the street, holding the coin and feeling as if the world had changed around her. For the first time in years, she wasn't acting. She was being genuinely herself, vulnerable and human. That night, Grace stayed at the town's only boarding house, a simple but welcoming place. The owner, a lady named Martha, received her with curiosity, but without asking many questions. During dinner, Grace couldn't stop thinking about the encounter with Samuel and the meaning of that coin. The next day, she decided to look for him. She discovered that he lived on a small farm on the outskirts of town, a modest but well-kept place. When she arrived there, she found Samuel tending to a garden where he grew vegetables that he later distributed free to the most needy families. Grace approached, saying she had come to return the coin. Samuel stopped working and looked at her with that same serene smile, explaining that the coin wasn't his to be returned, that it now belonged to her. Grace confessed that she didn't understand the gesture, since he didn't even know her. Samuel approached, wiping his hands on his shirt, and explained that knowing someone has nothing to do with knowing their name or profession, but rather with recognizing the person's soul. He had recognized hers. Grace felt a shiver and asked what he had seen in her. Samuel replied that he saw a woman who had conquered the entire world, but lost herself in the process. He saw someone who has so much to give, but had forgotten how to do it. Samuel's words hit Grace like a punch to the stomach. It was exactly what she felt, but had never been able to put into words. She had spent so much time building a perfect public image that she had forgotten who she really was underneath all that performance. Grace asked how he knew that, with tears in her eyes. Samuel explained that he had been in the same place. When he lost his family, he thought his life was over. He spent months wondering why God had left him alive while taking away the people he loved most. He became angry, rebelled, almost destroyed himself. Samuel paused, looking toward the horizon, and continued explaining that then he realized something important. The pain he felt wasn't just his. It was the pain of every father who loses a child, of every husband who loses a wife, of every person who feels alone in the world. And he understood that he had a choice. He could let that pain consume him, or he could use it to help others who were going through the same thing. Grace listened to every word as if it were the first time someone spoke her language. She asked how he had made that choice. Samuel explained that he started small, helping a sick neighbor, bringing food to a family that was going hungry. Each simple gesture reminded him that he still had purpose, that his life still had meaning. Grace questioned whether the pain had passed. Samuel shook his head, explaining that pain never completely goes away, but it transforms. It stops being something that destroys us and becomes something that connects us with other human beings. Shared pain is divided pain, and when we help someone carry the burden, ours also becomes lighter. Grace looked at the coin in her hand and asked what its real meaning was. Samuel explained that his grandfather had given him an identical coin when he was a child, saying it represented a choice we all have to make in life. We can look at only one side, focusing on what we lost, what we lack, what went wrong. Or we can flip the coin and look at the other side, seeing the possibilities, the opportunities to start over, the chances to make a difference in someone's life. Grace turned the coin in her hand, observing both sides, and asked which side Samuel had chosen. He replied that he chooses every day to look at the side of hope, not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. Because when we stop believing we can make a difference, we stop truly living. At that moment, something broke inside Grace. All the masks she had worn for years, all the emotional armor she had built, everything crumbled. She began to cry, not the calculated tears she shed on stage, but genuine tears of someone who had finally found a mirror for her soul. Samuel said nothing. He just stayed there, offering his silent presence, allowing Grace to feel everything she had repressed for so long. When she finally stopped crying, he spoke softly about true courage. He explained that it's not about never being afraid or never feeling pain, but about feeling all of that and still choosing to love, choosing to help, choosing to continue. Grace spent the following days in Millbrook, and for the first time in years, she wasn't following a script. There were no rehearsals, no performances, no expectations to fulfill. She simply existed, observed, learned. She accompanied Samuel in his daily activities and discovered a completely different world from what she knew. She saw how he cared for an elderly lady who lived alone, how he helped a young orphan learn to read, how he mediated conflicts between neighbors with patience and wisdom. One afternoon, while they helped repair the roof of a widow's house, Grace asked why he did all of that. Samuel simply replied that it was because he could. Because he had health, he had strength, he had knowledge, and when we have something, our responsibility is to share it. Grace questioned whether he didn't gain anything from it. Samuel stopped hammering and looked at her with that smile she was learning to love, explaining that he gained everything. He gained purpose, he gained connection, he gained the certainty that his life had meaning. There was no greater wealth than that. Grace began to understand. Throughout her career, she had sought external validation, applause, positive reviews, recognition from society, but she had never experienced the deep satisfaction that came from doing something genuinely good for someone without expecting anything in return. In the third week in Millbrook, Grace made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. She cancelled her tour, which would take her to 10 more cities, and decided to stay. Not forever, but for as long as necessary to rediscover who she really was. She began teaching theater to the town's children. At first, it was just a way to keep busy, but she soon discovered there was something magical about seeing those children's eyes shine when they learned to express their emotions through art. One night, while they walked down the town's main street, Samuel commented on the gift Grace possessed. He explained that she had talent not just for acting, but for inspiring. Grace admitted she had never thought of it that way, always seeing her talent as something that belonged to her, that she used for her own benefit. Samuel explained that talent is like a water spring. If you keep it closed, it dries up. But if you allow it to flow and nourish other people, it becomes stronger and more abundant. Grace stopped walking and asked Samuel a personal question. She questioned whether he had never thought about remarrying, about rebuilding a family. Samuel was silent for a moment, then explained that he had thought about it. Yes, but he learned that true love isn't about replacing what we lost, but about honoring what we had and being open to new ways of loving. Grace asked if he was open to that. He looked into her eyes, and Grace saw there a depth that made her tremble. Samuel replied that he was learning to be. That night, Grace couldn't sleep. For the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about herself, her problems, her anxieties. She was thinking about Samuel, about the way he had transformed his pain into purpose, his loss into gain for others. But she was also thinking about her own journey. She had arrived in Millbrook as a lost, empty, directionless woman, and now, just a few weeks later, she felt as if she were rediscovering not only who she was, but who she could become. The coin Samuel had given her was always in her pocket. Sometimes when she felt lost or confused, she would take it and remember his words about the two sides. She was learning to flip the coin, to look at possibilities instead of fixating on losses. A month after her arrival, Grace received a telegram from her manager in San Francisco. He was desperate, explaining that she was ruining her career, that theaters were canceling contracts, that she needed to return immediately. Grace read the telegram 3 times, then folded it carefully and put it in the drawer. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel panic at the thought of disappointing other people. She felt only a deep calm, the certainty that she was exactly where she needed to be. That afternoon, she looked for Samuel at his farm. He was in the field, harvesting corn that he would later distribute to the needy families in the region. Grace showed him the telegram, and Samuel read it silently, then returned the paper asking what she would do. Grace admitted she didn't know, that for the first time in her life, she didn't know what the next step was. Samuel asked how she felt about that. Grace thought for a moment and replied that she felt scared but also free. Samuel smiled, explaining that fear and freedom often walk together. When we stop following the script that others wrote for us, we have to learn to write our own. Grace questioned what would happen if she wrote it wrong. Samuel explained that there's no right or wrong when it comes to living authentically. There's only honest or dishonest with oneself. Grace looked at the fields around them, at the simplicity of that life she had learned to love. Then she told Samuel something she had never told anyone. When she was a child, before becoming an actress, she wanted to be a teacher. She dreamed of teaching children, of making a difference in their lives. But when she discovered she had talent for acting, everyone told her it would be a waste not to pursue that career, that she could make a lot of money, have fame, recognition. Samuel confirmed that she had followed their advice. Grace agreed, explaining that for years she thought she had made the right choice. But now, seeing how she felt when teaching the children in Millbrook, she realized she might have lost something important along the way. Samuel stopped working and approached her, asking if he could tell her something he learned when he lost his family. Grace nodded. He explained that it's never too late to return to what really matters, never too late to choose love instead of fear, authenticity instead of approval, purpose instead of profit. Grace questioned whether it wasn't too late, whether she hadn't already wasted the best years of her life. Samuel took her hands between his, calloused hands that told stories of honest work and dedication. He explained that she was 40 years old, and if God willed it, she still had 40 ahead of her. The question wasn't whether she had wasted the past, but what she would do with the future. At that moment, Grace felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not the vague hope that things would magically improve, but the concrete hope that she had the power to change her own story. Grace declared with a firm voice that she wanted to stay. Not forever, but for longer. She wanted to learn from Samuel. She wanted to continue teaching the children. She wanted to discover who she really was when she wasn't performing for anyone. Samuel smiled, and Grace saw tears in his eyes. He confessed that he wanted her to stay, not just because she was making a difference in the children's lives, but because she was making a difference in his life too. Grace asked how that was possible. Samuel explained that she had reminded him of something he had forgotten, that it's possible to start over, that it's possible to find love again, even after losing everything, that it's possible to be happy without feeling guilty about it. Grace felt her heart race and asked what he was trying to say. Samuel confessed that he had fallen in love with her, not with the famous actress, not with the woman everyone admired in theaters. He had fallen in love with the Grace who taught children with patience, who helped care for the sick, who wasn't afraid to get her hands dirty to help someone. He had fallen in love with the real woman she was when she stopped performing. Grace felt as if the world had stopped. For years, men had declared themselves to her, but she always felt they were in love with an image, with a fantasy. Samuel was the first who saw beyond the facade, who loved who she really was underneath all the performance. Grace whispered that she had also fallen in love with him, for his kindness, for his wisdom, for his ability to transform pain into love. He had taught her that it's possible to live with purpose, that it's possible to be happy helping others. They kissed there in the middle of the cornfield, with the sun setting on the horizon. It was a kiss that sealed not only the love between them, but a new way of living, a new understanding of what really mattered in life. In the months that followed, Grace and Samuel became inseparable. She continued teaching theater to the children, but also began organizing benefit performances, using her talent to raise funds for the needy families in the region. Samuel supported her in everything, but also continued with his own charity activities. Together, they became a powerful force of transformation in Millbrook and neighboring towns. Grace wrote to her manager, explaining her decision to change her life. He was furious, threatened to sue her, said she was throwing away a brilliant career. But Grace didn't waver. For the first time, she was living according to her own values, not the expectations of others. 6 months after her arrival in Millbrook, Grace and Samuel married in a simple but moving ceremony. The entire town participated, and Grace realized she had never felt as loved and accepted as at that moment. During the ceremony, Samuel gave a speech that touched everyone's hearts. He explained that Grace had taught him that true love isn't about finding someone perfect, but about finding someone who inspires us to be the best version of ourselves. She had arrived as a lost woman, but actually, he was the one who was lost. Lost in his pain, in his loneliness, in his belief that he could never be completely happy again. Grace had shown him that it's possible to honor the past without being its prisoner, that it's possible to love again without betraying those we loved before. Grace, in turn, spoke about the transformation she had experienced. When she arrived in Millbrook, she was an actress playing the role of a successful woman, but inside she was empty, lost, without purpose. Samuel had given her a coin and explained that it represented a choice. That day, she chose to look at the side of hope, possibility, love. She chose to use her talents, not for her own glory, but to make a difference in others' lives. She chose to live authentically, even if it meant disappointing some people. After the wedding, Grace and Samuel established an art school in Millbrook, where children from the entire region could learn theater, music, and literature for free. Grace used her connections in the artistic world to bring qualified teachers and resources to the school. The school became a symbol of hope for many poor families who saw there an opportunity for their children to have a better future. Grace discovered that teaching was much more rewarding than acting. Seeing the growth and development of those children gave her a satisfaction that no applause had ever provided. Samuel continued with his charity activities, but now had Grace by his side. Together, they organized assistance programs for widows, orphans, and families in difficulty. Samuel's farm became a distribution center for food and clothing for the entire region. A year after the wedding, Grace discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with joy, but also with fear. She had lost a child years before and feared the tragedy would repeat itself. Samuel noticed her anxiety and reassured her with his characteristic wisdom. He explained that fear was natural, but they couldn't let it prevent them from living fully. That baby was a blessing, a new chance to love, to care, to make a difference in the world. They should receive it with gratitude and hope. Grace gave birth to a girl, whom they named Hope. The child brought even more joy and purpose to their lives. Grace discovered that being a mother was the most important role she had ever played, and this time, it wasn't acting, it was real life. While caring for Hope, Grace continued with her work at the school. She developed a teaching method that combined art with moral values, teaching children not just to act, but to be better people. Samuel became a dedicated and loving father. He taught Hope about the importance of kindness, generosity, and perseverance, The girl grew up seeing her parents constantly helping others, and this became natural for her too. 5 years after her arrival in Millbrook, Grace received an unexpected letter. It was from a theater in New York, offering her the leading role in a new play that promised to be a great success. The salary offered was 10 times greater than anything she had ever earned before. Grace read the letter several times, then showed it to Samuel. He read it silently, then asked what she felt about it. Grace thought for a moment and replied that she felt curiosity, but not desire. 5 years ago, that letter would have left her euphoric. That day, it only made her realize how much she had changed. Samuel asked if she didn't feel even a little nostalgia for fame, applause, the adrenaline of the stage. Grace admitted she missed the stage, yes, but not the fame. And she had discovered she could have the stage there too, in a much more meaningful way. When she saw a shy child gain confidence through theater, when she saw a young person discover their talent and passion, she felt a satisfaction that no applause from strangers had ever given her. Samuel smiled and kissed her forehead, commenting that she had found her true stage. Grace folded the letter and put it in a drawer, not as a lost opportunity, but as a reminder of how far she had come in her journey of self-discovery. That night, while putting Hope to bed, Grace took the coin Samuel had given her years before. She still carried it always, like a talisman, a constant reminder of the choice she had made to look at the side of hope. Hope asked what that was, seeing the coin shine in the lamplight. Grace explained it was a very special gift her father had given her when they met. He had taught her that every coin has 2 sides, and we can choose which side to look at. Hope asked which side her mother chose. Grace smiled, kissing her daughter's forehead, and explained that she always chose the side that reminded her she could make a difference in the world, and she hoped Hope would also make that choice when she grew up. Hope fell asleep, holding her mother's hand, and Grace stayed there for a while, reflecting on her journey. She had arrived in Millbrook as a famous but empty woman. Now she was a common but fulfilled woman. She had traded the applause of thousands for the gratitude of a few dozen, and discovered it was a very advantageous deal. Samuel entered the room and sat beside the bed, asking quietly what she was thinking about. Grace replied that she was thinking about how strange destiny was. If someone had told her 6 years ago that she would abandon her career to live in a small interior town, teaching children and caring for a family, she would have laughed in their face. Samuel asked how she felt about it now. Grace explained that she realized she hadn't abandoned her career, but found her true vocation. She had discovered that her talent wasn't just for entertaining, but for transforming, and that true wealth wasn't in what we accumulate, but in what we share. Samuel took her hand and confessed he could tell her something. Grace replied that he always could. He explained that on that day, when he gave her the coin, he didn't know he was changing his own life too. He thought he was just helping a lost woman, but actually she had saved him as much as he had saved her. Grace asked how that was possible. Samuel explained that she had taught him it's possible to love again without feeling guilty, that it's possible to be happy without betraying the memory of those we lost. She had given him a new family, a new purpose, a new reason to wake up every day with gratitude. Grace felt tears in her eyes and asked if Samuel thought his first wife would approve of their happiness. Samuel was silent for a moment, then smiled. He explained that he was sure she would. Sarah always said that true love isn't possessive. She wanted him to be happy, even if it was without her, and he was sure she was happy seeing Hope grow, seeing the good they did together. They stayed there, in silence, holding hands and listening to Hope's peaceful breathing. It was a moment of perfect peace, the kind of moment Grace had spent her whole life looking for without knowing it. 10 years after her arrival in Millbrook, Grace was in the garden of the school she had founded, watching a children's performance. It was a play about kindness and generosity, written by herself, based on real stories from the community. Samuel was beside her, now with gray hair but with the same serene smile that had won her over years before. Hope, now 9 years old, was on stage, playing a girl who learned the importance of helping others. Samuel commented that Hope had her mother's talent. Grace replied that the girl also had her father's wisdom. The day before, Hope had asked why some people are bad. Grace had explained that people aren't born bad. They become bad when they stop believing they can make a difference, when they stop looking at the right side of the coin. Samuel laughed and asked what Hope had replied. Grace told him the girl had asked if she could teach those people to flip the coin. Samuel questioned whether Grace thought she could do that. Grace looked around, seeing all those children on stage, full of hope and determination. She saw the parents in the audience, many of them simple people who worked hard to give their children a better future. She saw the community that she and Samuel had helped transform over the years. Grace replied that she thought she was already doing that. One child at a time, one family at a time, one person at a time. The performance ended with warm applause. The children ran to hug Grace and Samuel, as they did after each performance. It was a ritual that never lost its magic for Grace. Later, when everyone had gone home, Grace stayed alone on the school stage. She took the coin from her pocket and looked at it in the starlight. How many times had that small piece of silver reminded her to make the right choice? How many times had it helped her find hope when everything seemed lost? Samuel appeared behind her, asking if she still carried the coin. Grace replied that she always carried it, that it reminded her of where she came from and who she chose to become. Samuel asked who she had chosen to become. Grace turned the coin in her hand, watching both sides shine, and explained that she had chosen to become someone who makes a difference, someone who uses their talents to elevate others, not just themselves. Someone who understands that true wealth lies in the love we give and receive. Samuel hugged her from behind, asking if she was happy with that choice. Grace looked at the stage where so many children had discovered their talents, at the chairs where so many families had gathered to celebrate art and community, at the school that had become a beacon of hope in the region. Grace replied that she was happier than she ever imagined possible. She explained that when she was famous, she thought she was living a dream, but now she realized that was just an illusion. The life they had there, the good they did, the love they shared, that was the real dream. Samuel kissed her neck softly, commenting that it was a dream they had built together, one choice at a time. Grace closed her eyes and felt a deep gratitude invade her heart. She had arrived in Millbrook as a lost woman, seeking something she didn't even know what it was. And she had found much more than she was looking for. She had found purpose, true love, a family, a community, and most importantly, she had found herself. The coin in her hand seemed heavier now, loaded with all the significant moments it had witnessed. It represented not just a choice made years ago, but a choice she continued making every day. The choice to look at the side of hope, possibility, love. That night, Grace put the coin in the special place where she always kept it, beside the bed. But before sleeping, she showed it to Hope, as she did every night. Hope asked if her mother would give her that coin someday. Grace smiled, explaining that someday, when Hope needed to remember she always has a choice, that she can always flip the coin and look at the side of hope. Hope asked what would happen if she forgot. Grace explained that then she would be there to remind her. And if she wasn't there, her father would be. And if he wasn't there, Hope would carry their memory in her heart. And that would be enough. Hope fell asleep with a smile on her face, and Grace watched her for a while. That child would grow up knowing she had the power to choose how to see the world, how to react to difficulties, how to use her talents to make a difference. It was the greatest inheritance Grace could leave. Not money or fame, but wisdom. The wisdom that life is a series of choices, and we can always choose love instead of fear, hope instead of despair, generosity instead of selfishness. 20 years after her arrival in Millbrook, Grace was sitting on her house's porch watching the sunset. Her hair was now gray, her face marked by time's lines, but her eyes shone with the same intensity as always. Samuel was beside her, reading a book to Hope, who was now a 19-year-old young woman about to graduate from the school her parents had founded. The girl had inherited her mother's artistic talent and her father's wisdom, and was preparing to go to university to study education. Hope interrupted the reading to ask her mother a question. She questioned whether Grace had ever regretted leaving her acting career. Grace thought for a moment. It was a question she was asked frequently, and the answer was always the same. Grace replied that she never regretted it, because she realized she had never stopped being an actress. She had just changed stages. Her stage now was real life, and her role was to be the best version of herself every day. Hope asked what the difference was. Grace explained that when she acted in theaters, she played characters created by others. Now she wrote her own script, and she had discovered it was much more rewarding to be the protagonist of her own life than to be the protagonist of a fictional character's life. Hope smiled and asked about the coin, whether her mother still carried it. Grace took the coin from her pocket, explaining that after all these years she still carried it always. It reminded her that each day is a new opportunity to choose who she wanted to be. Hope confessed a secret to her mother. She said she wanted to be like her when she grew up, wanted to use her talents to help others, wanted to make a difference in the world. Grace felt tears in her eyes and explained that Hope was already like her. Actually, she was better than her because she was learning these lessons from childhood, while Grace had taken 40 years to discover them. Samuel closed the book and looked at the two women of his life, commenting on what made him most proud. Both asked what it was. He explained that it was seeing how love multiplies. When he gave that coin to Grace, he was planting a seed, but she had done much more than let the seed grow. She had become a tree that bears fruit, and those fruits became new trees. Hope was one of those fruits, and all the children they taught were other fruits. Grace took her husband's hand, explaining that Samuel had taught her that true love isn't about receiving, but about giving, and that when we give love genuinely, it comes back to us multiplied. Samuel replied that Grace had taught him it's never too late to start over, to find a new purpose, to be happy again. Hope watched her parents with admiration. She had grown up seeing that love, that partnership, that mutual dedication and to the common good. For her, that was normal, but she was beginning to understand it was something rare and precious. Hope confessed that when she went to university, she would miss her parents very much, but she would take with her everything they had taught her, and someday, when she had her own family, she would teach them the same lessons. Grace and Samuel looked at each other, knowing they had fulfilled their most important mission, raising a daughter who understood the true meaning of life. That night, after Hope went to sleep, Grace and Samuel stayed on the porch, watching the stars. It was something they did every night for 20 years, a simple ritual that symbolized the peace and gratitude they felt for their lives. Grace confessed to Samuel that sometimes she thought about what would have happened if he hadn't given her that coin that day, if he had just watched her pass by and continued with his life. Samuel asked what she thought would have happened. Grace replied that she thought she would have continued lost. She would have returned to San Francisco, continued with her career, earned more money, more fame, but she would have died empty, without ever discovering who she really was. Samuel took her hand, explaining that he would have continued living a good but incomplete life, helping others, but without having someone to share the joys and difficulties, without having a family again. Grace commented on how incredible it was that a simple gesture could change everything. Samuel agreed, but explained that it wasn't just the gesture. It was the choice Grace made to be open to change. Many people receive signs, opportunities, but choose to ignore them because it's easier to stay in the comfort zone. Grace nodded, recognizing that Samuel was right. The coin was just the catalyst. The real transformation happened because she chose to change. Samuel confirmed that she continued choosing every day. Grace looked at the coin in her hand and confessed she had always wanted to ask a question but never had the courage. She asked why he had chosen her, of all the people who passed through Millbrook, to receive the coin. Samuel was silent for a moment, then smiled. He explained that he saw in her what she couldn't see in herself. Grace asked what he had seen. Samuel replied that he saw a woman who had conquered everything society says we should want, but who was still looking for something. He saw someone who had a good heart, but had forgotten how to use it. He saw potential for transformation, for growth, for love. Grace questioned how he could know all that just by looking at her. Samuel explained that he had gone through the same process. When he lost his family, he was also lost, also looking for meaning. And when he found his purpose in helping others, he learned to recognize that search in other people's eyes. Grace approached him, confessing that he had saved her life. Samuel replied that she had saved his too. They were mutual saviors. They kissed under the stars, a kiss that carried all the love, all the gratitude, all the history they had built together. 30 years after her arrival in Millbrook, Grace was in the hospital, holding Samuel's hand. He had suffered a heart attack and had been hospitalized for a week. The doctors said he was stable, but Grace knew time was running out. Hope, now a 29-year-old woman, married with 2 small children, was on the other side of the bed. She had become a teacher, as she had always dreamed, and ran a school in a neighboring town, continuing her parents' legacy. Hope asked if she should call the pastor. Samuel weakly shook his head, explaining that it wasn't necessary, that he was at peace. Grace felt tears in her eyes, asking him not to talk like that he would be fine. He looked at her with that serene smile she loved so much, explaining that she shouldn't be afraid. He had lived a full life, a life with purpose. He loved and was loved. He made a difference in the world. He couldn't ask for more than that. Grace insisted that she still needed him, that Hope still needed him, that his grandchildren still needed him. Samuel squeezed her hand with what little strength he had, explaining that they didn't need him physically. They carried everything he was inside them. His love, his wisdom, his values, all of that lived in them. Hope was crying silently, asking how they would continue without him. Samuel explained that the same way they continued when he was there, doing good, helping others, choosing love instead of fear. They didn't need him for that. They already knew how to do it. Grace took the coin from her pocket, asking if Samuel wanted her to leave it with him. He looked at the coin and smiled, explaining that no, that coin still had work to do. He asked Grace to keep it for Hope, and when the time came, she would pass it to her children. Grace insisted that it was he who had given her the coin, that it was his. Samuel explained that it was never his. He had just kept it until he found the right person to receive it, just as his grandfather had done with him, just as Grace would do with Hope. Grace understood. The coin wasn't an object, it was a symbol that passed from person to person, carrying with it the message that we always have a choice. We can always flip the coin and look at the side of hope. Samuel closed his eyes and breathed deeply, asking one thing of Grace. She said it was anything. He asked her to continue making a difference, continue teaching, continue being the light she had become, and to always remember that true love never dies, it just changes form. That night, Samuel died peacefully, holding the hands of the two women he loved most in the world. His last breath was accompanied by a smile, as if he were seeing something wonderful they couldn't see. Samuel's funeral was a celebration of his life. Hundreds of people came from all over the region to pay their respects. Each one had a story to tell about how Samuel had touched their lives, how he had made a difference in difficult times. Grace gave a speech that moved everyone. She explained that Samuel always said life isn't about what we lose, but about what we can still give. That day, although her heart was broken by his departure, she chose to look at what he had given them. He had given them love, wisdom, example. He taught that true wealth lies in making a difference in others' lives, and that wealth, that inheritance, no one could take from them. After the funeral, Grace felt lost for the first time in decades. Samuel had been her companion, her best friend, her spiritual guide. How would she continue without him? It was Hope who helped her find the way. One afternoon, while they organized Samuel's things, Hope shared something her father had told her before dying. Hope explained that Samuel had said Grace still had much work to do, that her mission hadn't ended. It was just entering a new phase. Grace looked at her daughter and asked about this new phase in a tone of curiosity and hope. Hope explained that Samuel had suggested Grace should write a book, tell her story, their story, the lessons they had learned. Grace questioned who would be interested in her story. Hope smiled, explaining that many people were lost like Grace had been. Many people needed to hear that it's possible to start over, that it's possible to find purpose and meaning even after losing everything, that it's possible to transform pain into love, emptiness into fulfillment. Grace realized that Samuel was right, even in his final moments. Her story wasn't just hers. It was the story of anyone who had ever felt lost, anyone who had ever wondered if it was too late to change, anyone who had ever needed to remember that there's always hope. She took the coin from her pocket and looked at it one more time. It had been with her through every important moment of her transformation, from that first day when Samuel offered it to her in the dusty street of Millbrook, to that moment when she understood her new mission. Grace smiled, feeling Samuel's presence around her. She knew what she had to do. She would write their story, share the lessons they had learned, pass on the wisdom of the coin to anyone who needed to hear it. Because that's what the coin really represented, the eternal truth that no matter how dark things seem, no matter how lost we feel, we always have a choice. We can always flip the coin and choose to look at the side of hope, love, and possibility. And Grace Whitmore, the famous actress who had found her true calling in a small town in Oregon, was ready to share that truth with the world.